Bond fans, and welcome once again, and I must apologise for my rather slovenly look this week. I'm giving the Daniel Craig in Skyfall stubble look a bit of a go. But for today's video we're going to be talking about my own personal top 10 favourite James Bond gun barrel sequences, which is one of the video requests I get most frequently, really, which baffles me, because I always thought of the gun barrel as such a, well, you know, it's a minute detail of the films, really.
I mean, sure, it's an iconic image and one that immediately makes people think of Bond, but at first glance they're all kinda, well, the same, right? It's all black and grey, there's a white hole, guy walks in, bang, blood drips down, now onto the film. But actually, each one is different and unique in its own way, despite a lot of them using the same footage. I'll be using a certain criteria with which to rank these things, one being the look of the barrel itself, two being the performance and final stance of the actor, third being the music, and finally, the first shot of the movie that the barrel opens into.
So, with that in mind, let's kick off the proceedings, as per usual, with our honourable and dishonourable mentions. Obviously, we still haven't had a proper, traditional Daniel Craig gun barrel sequence at the start of the film. I'm not completely opposed to the idea of playing around with this particular trope of the James Bond films, but it just so happens that out of the three Daniel Craig films, there's only one instance where I think the gun barrel has worked effectively. In the other two Craig films, I feel like they fail for mostly different, but also quite a lot of similar reasons.
The similar reason being that the look of the gun barrel itself is terrible. It's a really bad CG graphic, it has no texture, it has no interesting design. Both are very, very boring. I think Craig's walk-on is much too fast in the Quantum one, the blood is also too fast and all wrong, and I hate how it then becomes the title of the film. Why? I have no idea. Probably because the title is so bad they had to remind the audience again what the hell the film they just watched was called. In the Skyfall one, his walk-on is much better, but again, the blood is crap, and I also resent this sequence being at the end of the film and not at the front. I could live with the Quantum one being at the end, because that was the closure to the Vesper story that started with Casino Royale and ended in Quantum. In Skyfall...
like, I've heard Sam Mendes articulate why the gun barrel is at the end of Skyfall and not the beginning, but I just don't quite agree. He didn't think it would fit in with the first shot he had planned for the film. I think it would have been fine. But you know what, enough for the negatives and on with the positives.
I think what I love about this particular gun barrel sequence is that it's so archetypal, it's so perfect, it so encapsulates what the look and sound of a standard gun barrel should be. I'd also give a shout out to this because it's the first gun barrel sequence that leads straight into the film rather than into the titles like in Dr. No. I wish it just opened up into the first shot of the film instead of just fading to black and then fading back up, but this is a minor quibble. Of course, we all know that that's actually stuntman Bob Simmons as Bond and not Sean Connery. Connery refilmed the sequence for Thunderball when a widescreen presentation was decided upon for further Bond films, and I can easily say I much prefer Connery to Simmons, but Simmons' final pose in this version is great. I just hate the little hop he gives just before he fires.
It's just like something like a loud noise made him jump and he like, ooh, shot on impulse or something like that. But, you know, regardless, the John Barry music here is fantastic.
I'll talk more about Brosnan's gun barrels later, but this one specifically I really like for the cool music, and it's also notable for being the first gun barrel that opens up immediately on Bond himself.
Well, that's all I got for this one. Let's start the list.
Number 10.
Out of 7 Roger Moore Bond films, there were 2 filmed gun barrels, one for Live and Let Die and Golden Gun, and one for the rest. I know that up front I talked about how these gun barrels are all different, and they are, but a lot of the Moore ones that were scored by John Barry...
A lot of them felt kinda samey. Moonraker, Octopussy, A View to a Kill, they all have... Well, they all use the same footage of the Roger Moore gun barrel sequence, and they all have very similar music by John Barry.
But of those, I think A View to a Kill is the best. The particular music orchestration used on this one is great, and I love Moore's performance in this particular set of sequences. I also love the helicopter shot that the barrel opens into. I'm a fan of when the first shot of the movie is a nice big establishing shot of a lovely bit of scenery, and this one is very, very cool.
Number 9.
I bet a lot of you thought this was going to be my dishonourable mention, didn't you?
Well, no, I actually don't really mind this particular sequence that much anymore. Obviously, the most notable thing about it is that the bullet flies right down the barrel and, out of the audience. Some call this cheap and tacky, and I can certainly see that point of view, but I also find it a little bit cute. I'm not sure if the gun barrel ever needs to be given a full makeover or changed. I think the standard formula for it is pretty perfect. It doesn't need bells and whistles like this, but especially considering that, this is the one that accompanies Die Another Day, I actually quite like this particular sequence in the context of the film it accompanies, as I say.
Number 8.
I may not be an especially big fan of this movie, but I've always been quite vocal about how much I just adore Michael Kamen's score, and his particular take on Dalton's gun barrel is my favourite of his by a mile.
Not that there's anything wrong with the Living Daylights sequence, of course, but it just had that same John Barry, Roger Moore era music over it.
I like it when each Bond has a distinctive sound to his gun barrels, and for me, Kamen provided Dalton with just that. It's a harsh and quite intense, short little piece, and I love it. I also think Dalton's performance is great for his sequence. His walk is perfect, and I like how he turns. My only real criticism is that I don't like how far apart his legs are when he poses.
Oh gosh, you've come to the bottom of the barrel of things to talk about when you're commenting about, how far apart the actors' damn legs are, but you know what, I'm here to nitpick, and I will continue to pick even the tiniest of nits. On with the next one.
Number 7.
And 6.
So I know it's a bit of a cheat to have like 2 in one spot, but I really couldn't pick between these 2 for which one I preferred, so I'll explain why.
These are the only gun barrel sequences to utilise a kind of... I don't really know how to describe it. It's like a shimmering sort of kaleidoscope effect. Majesty's did it first, but after an initial movement, the shimmering remains static, whereas in Diamonds it continues to move, which I think is great. Also, very, very fitting, considering that the film is all about, well, diamonds, so of course it should have the blingingest gun barrel.
I don't know why this effect was never used again, but I like it.
Other than the shimmering effect, I'm not sure how I feel about Lazenby's gun barrel. It's a really mixed bag. It's kind of juddery in a few places, like they filmed him walking further than they needed to or something, so it looks like he's walking on the spot, like on a treadmill at a couple of points. I hate how he drops down to one knee, but I like his stride when he walks in, and I also kind of like how Bond himself disappears as the blood trickles down. Like I say, a mixed bag, but one where I think the positives outweigh the negatives.
Number 5.
Another one that's all about the music. This was also the first of the 2-shot Roger Moore gun barrels. His performance in both is quite similar, but I think I prefer the other one over this. It's just more confident and more moves better and his stance is better. But still, the music for this one... The music, guys! The music! Also, it opens up into a great establishing shot of New York.
Number 4.
Yes, the one Craig Gunbarrel sequence so far that I actually think is decent. In this film, it made complete sense not to have the gun barrel at the very start of the film. The Casino Royale pre-title sequence is great. It shows Bond achieving his 00 status and ends with this super cool gun barrel sequence. There's no walk on, he just spins and shoots, but Craig does this move perfectly. The graphic design of the barrel is quite nice too. It's certainly unique, but I like the reflective sheen it has. The blood is a lovely deep colour, and how it segues into the main title sequence is great, a la Dr. No.
It's a super cool sequence, it's just over so damn quickly. I mean, you know, I would have liked to have seen more, but then, just like the Die Another Day gun barrel sequence was appropriate for Die Another Day, maybe the cold, quick bluntness of this particular gun barrel sequence suits Casino Royale perfectly too.
Number 3.
Okay, now I'll talk more about Pierce Brosnan's gun barrel performance. It's perfect. Brosnan is, without a doubt, in my mind, gives the best gun barrel performance of all the Bonds. He has the perfect stride, the perfect turn, and the perfect final pose. I can't fault what he does at all. I also think that aesthetically this is the nicest looking gun barrel of the lot, and I wish they'd used something more akin to this version for the Craig films. Daniel Kleinman took the classic Maurice Binder designed gun barrel and updated it to a gorgeous moving 3D version for the modern Brosnan era. I love how it moves and as it follows Bond, and the blood oozing down at the perfect speed is the perfect colour. It's just glorious.
So why the GoldenEye one over all the other Brosnan ones? Well, for me it all comes down to the music.
I think GoldenEye possesses the best Brosnan gun barrel music, and I also think it opens up into the most impressive first shot of all of Brosnan's movies, with the plane going over the dam. It's so high scope and impressive. Oh, a wonderful sequence.
Number 2.
Before I get down to the main obvious reason why I love this one so much, I'd just like to say that if Brosnan gave my favourite gun barrel performance, then Moore's second gun barrel performance comes a, well, close second. The only real thing I prefer about Brosnan's is his final stance. I much prefer the one-hand shot rather than two. There's just something more confident about Brosnan's final pose. I also think that this particular gun barrel design for Your Eyes Only looks better than the other films that use this sequence. It's kind of brighter, more black and white than grey. I like it. I also love how the dot opens up into the movie with a jarring cut rather than slowly widening. It's a lovely first shot, and, you know, the music is pretty perfect.
Speaking of music, I just love this track. A lot of you sort of commented on my previous top 10 James Bond theme versions video asking why this wasn't on there. I proclaimed my love for it in my For Your Eyes Only video, and a lot of people were surprised it wasn't there. And to be honest, I don't quite know why I didn't put it on there. Maybe it's just because it's kind of short and I never really feel like I can, you know, get into it. But you know what, every time I play For Your Eyes Only, I'm dancing away. Dancing. Disco. Dancing. Disco.
Number 1.
Yes! The first ever James Bond gun barrel sequence is my favourite. But why? I've already expressed that I prefer other Bond performances, opening shots, and gun barrel designs, so what makes this one so good? specifically for me, it's the atmosphere that this one creates, and how that atmosphere just boosts everything else about this sequence. The electronic beeping and twittering is so unusual and strange. I would love to know what it was like seeing this film for the first time in 1962, having never seen Bond on the big screen before. What did people think when this started? My absolute favourite gun barrel moment is when the gun is fired here.
I think this sequence has the best gunshot sound of all the gun barrel sequences. It's just so loud and intimidating, and how it echoes, and then it sort of merges into the, you know, a big bombastic, you know, James Bond theme. It's just, oh my god, it's just the perfect way to start off a franchise.
This is the best gun barrel sequence for getting me excited about watching a Bond film. It's so perfectly timed and pretty much seamlessly flows into the main title sequence. When it comes to gun barrels, for me, the first is still the very best.
And so that's it for this one. I mean, what do you guys think? As always, I'm incredibly interested to know your own personal thoughts and feelings about this list. Was I nitpicking too much? Was I not nitpicking enough? Please leave your own personal list in the comments below, or follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, send me a message on whatever social media thing you would so wish to do so on. And until next month, I shall bid you farewell for now, Bond fans.